All right, looks like we are recording. I have 10 o'clock, so I am going to get us started on the elevation certificate training. So here's an agenda for what we will be covering today. We're going to be going over the requirements of an elevation certificate, what is new from the last elevation certificate issuance. Then we're going to go through section by section to review what portions need to be filled out and what information you need to put where. Then we're also going to cover a compliance review example, essentially going through an elevation certificate as if you were um, a community official looking to get or issue a certificate of occupancy. Let me just make sure. Oh, thank you, Stephanie, for letting people in. All right. So then after we do a compliance review example, we're going to go over some common elevation certificate errors and then wrap up with some helpful resources. So this is the FEMA elevation certificate that you can see here. It is the 2023 edition that was released in July of 2023. This is an administrative tool. It is very helpful for both insurance and community officials. It can help communities ensure compliance of new substantial improvements in new construction in the special flood hazard area to make sure that it complies with community floodplain regulations. The elevation certificate is no longer a requirement of insurance rating because FEMA has revamped their insurance rating methodology to what's called risk rating 2.0. Essentially, the insurance agencies will factor in the location of the property, its distance to nearby flooding sources, which community it is in, and what kind of regulations that community has. It also factors in how the building is actually built, whether or not you're building a house made out of cardboard versus a brick house. Those two are going to have very different flood risks, even though they're right next to each other. The elevation certificate can also be used to support a letter of map amendment. It is essentially the final legal document that certifies how high the lowest floor of a structure is and can then be used to get that structure removed from the special flood hazard area. So the current version of the elevation certificate whoops, this is incorrect. I meant to say it was released, not last month, it was released in July 7th of 2023. This update was to make sure that it aligns with the risk rating 2.0 new insurance rating methodology. It also has expanded sections to include more detail, and there's now a requirement for at least 2, but preferably 4 photographs accompanying the elevation certificate. So if your community is part of the community rating system or the CRS program, that is a program that offers discounted insurance rates for community members in communities which have elected to have higher than the minimum NFIP standards. One of those activities that you can get credit for the community rating system is requiring elevation certificates for all finished construction after either new construction or substantial improvements have been made within the special flood hazard area. Communities are required to review all elevation certificates for legibility, completeness, errors, and to verify compliance with the community's floodplain regulations. As part of the annual recertification process with the community rating system, communities are required to submit all elevation certificates that have been approved within the last year. And then the CRS team will review the elevation certificates and provide feedback in an elevation certificate evaluation report. This report will indicate any errors or compliance issues which are recommended to be addressed. So the cycle verification for the community rating system, you go through and submit all required elevation certificates, then the CRS team will review them and provide you with that elevation certificate report. And in order to be fully compliant with or to be fully verified with the CRS program, at least 90% of the community's elevation certificates must be correct, essentially having no problems. And if not, the community must correct those elevation certificates in order to stay in the CRS program. And your community's CRS credit score depends on the elevation certificate correctness. So just a quick learning check here. Feel free to put your answers in the chat. So in elevations, or true or false, does an elevation certificate certify whether or not a building is compliant within the community floodplain regulations and or minimum NFIP standards? I'll give you guys a moment to put whether you think that's true or false in the chat. I'm getting some answers in the chat here. Looks like true is the most common, or what everyone's agreeing on. That is actually false. So the elevation certificate is a report of the existing conditions. It essentially is the surveyor or engineer's stamp, or the surveyor's or engineer's stamp does not certify that it complies with federal, state, or local regulations. It only certifies the accuracy of the elevation data. It is up to the community to review the elevation certificate for completion and accuracy, and then to determine if that structure is compliant. So when reviewing an elevation certificate for compliance with the community's floodplain regulation, even with the professional engineer's seal, it is possible to make mistakes. So you only use an elevation certificate based off of finished construction. You don't want to be verifying compliance on a pre-construction elevation certificate. Communities also want to verify that all necessary data has been completed to determine the compliance, and also ensure that the elevation certificate makes sense. Like, you're not saying that the lowest floor is actually higher than the roof or something, just using common sense that the right floors are marked at the right elevations. So we're going to now go through the elevation certificate section by section. And here I have the sections listed out. There are also two new sections within the elevation certificate. There's a section H and I, which have been added in the latest issuance. But we're going to start off with section A, property information. So, oops, there we go. This is the latest version of the elevation certificate. So section A is completed for property in all flood zones. That's both A and B, inland and coastal. Now, this is generally detailing your property information, building owner's name, street address, city, state, zip code, property description. Essentially, you want to fill out your lot numbers, tax parcel numbers. And then here, item A6 is where you want to have indicate or the requirement for at least two, but when possible, four clear photographs, one for each side of the building. Additionally, this is where you're going to indicate which building diagram number you're going to use. And then sections A8 and A9 are now fully required to be all filled out with this new with the new elevation certificate. So the main changes to note from the previous version are that in section A5, the latitude and longitude are required for every project. Line A6 has been changed to require at least two, but recommending four photographs. And then, yeah, there's been some more detail added into A8 and or sections A8 and A9 for attached garages and crawl space or enclosures. So the building diagrams they can be found on pages 7 and 8 of the elevation certificate instructions. There are the elevations indicated on the building diagram correspond to elevations which should be entered in section C of the elevation certificate, which is the picture is shown here of section C. It essentially requires the elevations for the top of the bottom floor, the top of the next highest floor, lowest horizontal structure, highest and lowest adjacent grade. And then the diagram here on the right is an example of building diagram 7, which is elevated on full story foundation walls with partially or fully enclosed area below the elevated floor. This includes walkout levels where at least one side is at or above grade. The principal use of this building is located in the elevation floors or in the elevated floors of the building. So this is right here. I'm just going to go through some of the building diagrams that are possible to use on the elevation certificate. So you have diagram 1A for all slab-on grade single and multi-floor buildings, other than split level and high rise. Diagram 1B is similar, except there is a slab on stem wall with fill. Then the next building is diagram 2A for all single and multi-floor buildings with basement other than split level and high-rise buildings with basement either detached or row type with or without an attached garage. And then diagram 2B is again for all single and multi-floor buildings with a basement other than split level and high-rise buildings with a basement, either detached or row type with or without attached garage. I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but there is diagram 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and diagram 9. All of these buildings diagrams are to include whether or not there is a basement, or if it's a slab on grade or enclosed area below. And so it's just important to verify that you are using the correct diagram on the elevation certificate. So going back to section A, it is section A8 has been expanded for crawl spaces. So this is to gather all of the data because something that you would want to know about a crawl space is whether or not, well, first off, whether or not there is one and whether it's below grade on all four sides. And that affects how the structure is considered for both floodplain permitting and flood insurance purposes. Now, there's also elevations below or enclosures below the lowest floor, which can be used for attached garages. And those would be highlighted here in section A9 with the square footage and whether or not there is flood vents and the number of flood openings, and then the total or square inch of those flood openings. So here are some examples of what an attached garage can look like. It can be same elevation as the house, or it can be partially below grade, but not below grade on all sides. So it's just important to make sure when you're filling out those building diagrams that you're capturing the correct type of enclosure. So going on to section B, this is also completed for all properties within, or for properties within all flood zones. This is where you're going to fill out the flood insurance rate map information with the community name, and this has been changed now to require a section or a specific box for the community identification number. If you don't know your community identification number, it can generally be found on either the flood insurance rate map or the flood insurance study. Or if you don't have that information, you can always reach out to me and I can tell you what your community identification number is. So the new changes is that both 1A and 1B have been split up into two different boxes now, and item B10, this flood insurance study, has just been changed to only say flood insurance study rather than flood insurance study profile. But otherwise, everything else is still the same in section B. So when you are filling out the section B, so this is just some examples of where you can get some of the information required. So you can get your flood insurance rate map, index date, also your community identification number, map panel number, and the firm panel effective and or revised date. Those should all be on the flood insurance study. So in section B, for most AE zones, the base flood elevation should be taken from the flood insurance study and not the map panel. That is because on the maps, the base flood elevation is rounded to the nearest whole foot, but if you are filling out an elevation certificate, you want to make sure that you are using the most accurate data, which would be on the flood insurance study, which can be those base flood elevations should be to the 10th of a foot, i.e. 140.4 feet versus 100 feet, which you would see on the map. For AO zones, you just want to use the base flood elevation, the depth number that is on the flood insurance rate map. For V zones, it's pretty similar. You want to use the elevation that's on the map itself. And in zone A, not zone AE, zone A that has no base flood elevation available, you want to write in NA. And additionally, you want to make sure that you are using the same vertical datum that is on the flood insurance study. And in New Hampshire, we don't have any coastal barrier resource systems or otherwise protected areas. So at the moment, these would, item B12 would just be NA. And one thing you do want to know with these elevation certificates is even if there is a section that doesn't apply, you still want to write something in every box that is something that FEMA might flag for completion or completeness. All right, and then lastly, in section B, this really only applies for coastal zones, and you want to indicate whether or not the building is located seaward of the limit of moderate wave action. All right, so moving on to section C. This is where you're going to fill out the building elevation information. So you're going to want, doing an elevation certificate, it's generally best practice to use the finished construction when you are getting an elevation certificate. And sometimes you might do a pre-construction elevation certificate, but you always want to follow it up with a finished construction certificate. And then you just want to go through these, marking the vertical datum and which benchmark was used. And then also indicate whether or not there is a conversion factor that you are using to convert one elevation data to the other. And then it's pretty simple filling out the elevations. This is where you would just take it from the surveying data. One thing that has been changed in this section is that now the lowest adjacent grade has either natural or finished. Generally, if you don't know if it's a natural or finished grade, essentially if there was fill brought in, it's just best practice to put finished fill or finished adjacent grade if you don't know. So there are some other changes that have been made to section C are the definition for the bottom floor is the building's lowest enclosed area, including enclosures below the lowest floor. And then the lowest floor is now the lowest floor of the lowest enclosed area, including the basement, but excluding any enclosure below the lowest floor. And then there's now also something called the first floor height. And that is the first living floor above the building that is always at or above grade. So yeah, your first floor height would not be a basement, even if that was a living basement. All right, I got ahead of myself there. This is just where I was highlighting the lowest adjacent grade and that natural versus finished fill. So section D is the next section to be completed if the property has a determined base flood elevation. So the elevation certificate for this kind of property must be completed by a surveyor, engineer, or architect who is registered in your state or in New Hampshire. So you want to look at your paper copies to see that section D starts on the bottom front of the form and continues to the top back. So this is it's not, it spans a couple pages. So you just want to make sure that if you are filling it out on a paper copy, you get the whole section filled out. This is another location where errors can be made. If the person completing the form forgets to turn over the form and then add the signature and seal, because both the signature and seal are required for this section to be complete. And the document must be an original, otherwise FEMA is not going to accept it. And in the comments section, this is where you're going to want to put what type and location of machinery with the lowest elevation, whether the interior grade was used to determine if openings are within 1 foot of the grade or of the highest adjacent grade. Also unique building characteristics, such as a bulkhead, and then anything else that needs explanation. And this section did not have any updates in the 2023 amendment. So this is still exactly the same. Now, section E did get a couple updates. Well, I guess let's first start off with this is can be completed by the homeowner. And this is where you're going to be putting in like whether or not there is a crawl space, also the providing measurements for the top of the bottom floor and any areas within that have the flood openings or attached garages. And so in items E2, E4, or E3 and E4 would be reviewed by the local floodplain administrator to check the structure's compliance. This section is also used both for flood insurance purposes as well as floodplain management. All right. Okay, yeah, I believe that is, sorry, I had a couple notes that were supposed to go on a different section. All right, so moving on to section F. This one is pretty similar to section D. It's the section where the person completing the form needs to sign it. This should be the property owner or the owner's representative. Again, this is where you're going to be putting in those unique building characteristics and any comments for anything that needs to be explained. All right, so moving on to section G. This does not, it is, does not have to be, it's not required, but it is recommended for community officials to complete. It is the easiest way to keep track of permitting in the community. This section is for floodplain management purposes. It's not for flood insurance. And So essentially, one example is that putting the first floor 2 feet above the base flood elevation cost the cost of flood insurance in half. But again, this section is not necessarily used for the insurance purposes. So the main edits in this section are to connect the form to local permit and variance decisions and to document compliance with higher standards. Also, this line G8 is now required for every document, as well as line G11 or G11, whether or not a variance has been issued. And also local officials must provide your name, signature, date, and in this section. Now, going over some of the new sections. So this is section 8 or section H. It is the building's first floor height for information or first floor height information for all zones. This is not, or this section does not require a survey. This section is used for insurance purposes only. It is mostly just provided for the community or for convenience for the community. It's an easy way to keep track of permitting in the community. And this section for flood, yeah, again, it's for floodplain management purposes, not insurance purposes.
Sarah, before we keep going, we did get a question about the previous section, section G, where somebody was asking whether that is required or not.
It is still not required, but FEMA is now recommending it rather than having it be optional. So it is still optional, but FEMA is officially recommending it, I guess, is the distinction.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move on to section I. All right. So I put the wrong notes in this one as well. So this is essentially where the property owner is going to certify that all of the data is as correct as they are aware of, and essentially certifying that this is the document that they or you would like to submit as the legal or final legal elevation for your property. And again, this is where you're going to be adding any comments for unique characteristics of the building. All right, so now I'm now going to go over a compliance review example, essentially going through the elevation certificate as if I were a community official, just checking the form for compliance. So this just for this scenario, the community has permitted for new construction of a one-story residential structure with a crawl space and attached garage in zone AE. The community requires elevation of lowest floor to be at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. And the community conducted inspections during construction. and construction was completed, and a finished construction elevation certificate was submitted for review and approval. So starting out with section A, we are going to just be reviewing that the building owner's name is here, the address and city, state, and zip code are all correct. And also that the property description, the lot and parcel number are correct. Verifying it's the building's use, that this is a residential single-story building. Also verifying which elevation data is being used. And you want to verify the building diagram number. So, sorry. In this case, we are looking at building diagram 8, which is a building elevated on a crawl space with the floor of the crawl space at or above grade on at least one side with or without an attached garage. So right here we have the lowest adjacent grade of the crawl space indicated here. We have the top of the lowest floor, or sorry, no, the lowest floor height in C2B is indicated right here. And then we have the lowest adjacent grade marked here in C2A. So when filling out the property information, you just want to verify that the square footage of the crawl space is here. Also the number of flood openings and the total net area of the flood openings. And then for the attached garage, you want to verify the square footage of the garage, whether or not there are flood openings, and also the net area of the flood openings. In this case, there are none. And you would indicate here that there are no flood openings in the garage. This is just the same form or the same section A. This was the previous issuance of the elevation certificate, which has now been updated, but it still has the same information. It's just now kind of stacked on top of each other. All right, so you also want to ensure that for new construction or substantial improvements, the lowest floor must be elevated to the base flood elevation or higher if the community enforces a higher standard. And enclosures allowed below the base flood elevation must be used solely for parking, building access, or storage. Also cannot be below grade on all sides and can contain the required number of net area of flood openings. And then when all 3 of these enclosure criteria are met, then that's what's going to consider the lowest floor, this kind of first living floor space. And this enclosure would then be just a enclosure used for storage and parking and be fully vented. All right, so which enclosures require flood openings? That would be solid perimeter foundation walls. So crawl spaces with the full height under floor spaces or other underfloor spaces on which a manufactured home are installed. This is also garages attached to elevated buildings, enclosed areas with breakaway walls, under buildings elevated on open foundations in all zones, and also enclosed areas under buildings elevated on open foundations in A-zone areas. Also for accessory structures such as detached garages and storage sheds. All right, so an opening is considered a permanent opening that allows for free passage of water automatically in both directions without human intervention. A window, a door, or a garage door is not considered an opening, and openings may be, however, openings may be installed indoors. All right, so continuing, the openings shall provide a total net area of not less than 1 square inch for every square foot of area enclosed. That includes any bars, louvers, or other covers of the opening. Openings shall be on at least 2 sides of the enclosed area. And if a building has more than one enclosed area, each area must have openings to allow floodwater to directly enter. So also the bottom of a flood opening cannot be more than 1 foot above grade, interior or exterior, whichever is higher. So here I have a diagram. This is our flood opening here. This is the exterior grade. This is the foundation with the interior grade here. And this cannot be more than 1 foot. All right, so there are 2 types of flood openings. There are engineered and non-engineered openings. The engineered openings are designed and certified by a registered design professional as meeting the performance required by FEMA regulations. The non-engineered openings are used to satisfy prescriptive requirements. There's a wide variety of options available to satisfy these requirements. Here are some examples of some of the engineered flood vents. This is one that FEMA typically recommends. It will automatically open given a certain amount of pressure or hydrostatic pressure from the water. Now, non-engineered flood openings have to have the total square inches of flood openings equal to or greater than the square footage of the enclosure. So an 800 square foot enclosure must have at least 800 square inches of openings. And this is an example right here of a non-engineered flood opening where it's literally just an open vent that will not allow rainwater in, but flood waters are allowed to freely move into that area. All right, so in reviewing the crawl spaces and attached garages for the flood openings, so this is the checklist that you want to go through. So is the net area of flood openings AC, or line AC here, equal to or greater than the square footage of the crawl space enclosure? If yes, it's good. If not, you need to look further into that. So right here we have 4 flood openings and square footage is 720. We have 800 square inches of flood openings, so we are good with the crawl space. Does the number of openings within 1 foot of grade appear correct? Yes, it does. If engineered flood openings is checked, is there accompanying documentation about the flood openings? And that is something that would be submitted with the elevation certificate. And skipping this one because we did have at least one flood opening checked here. And then, is there an attached garage? And if so, is the square footage included? Yes, it is. That's right here. And then, are there openings? And if so, do they meet the same requirement noted for the above enclosures? No, there are not any flood openings in this garage. So we are good. Okay. All right, going on to section B. This is where we want to confirm that the community name and community identification number are all correct. You want to verify that the map panel number is correct and also check the index date on the panel, on the flood insurance rate map panel, and also whether or not there was a revision. You also want to verify the flood zone and the base flood elevation. Again, you want to make sure that this base flood elevation is taken from the flood insurance study, and it is to the nearest tenth of a foot. Again, just indicating the source of your data and which vertical data you are using. And again, there are no coastal barrier resource systems or otherwise protected areas in New Hampshire, so this does not apply. So you would just fill out no. All right, so going over section C, when you are ideally reviewing this during finished construction for issuing like a certificate of occupancy. You want to make sure that you have the vertical datum listed as well as which benchmark has been used, and then which vertical datum you're going to be using for all of the elevations for the different floor heights. So you want to look at your own, or you want to just go in and verify that all of these elevations make sense, such as the next highest floor is indeed higher than the bottom floor, and that this just follows logic sense. All right, so this right here is just indicating or comparing or showing you how each of these top of the bottom floor and the next height floor would be filled out corresponding to the different markers in the building diagram. So this is also where you want to verify that all of these, the top of the bottom floor is higher than the base flood elevation. And if not, that would be something you want to look more into to verify whether or not the basement is going to be considered the building compliant or not. All right, so just the checklist for section C. Is the bottom floor at or above base flood elevation? And if your community requires more freeboard than the state building code, which is 1 foot, you want to verify that that bottom floor is following your community's floodplain regulations. You also want to check if there is an enclosure below the base flood elevation, and if so, is it solely used for parking, storage, building access? And is the first floor of the enclosure above grade on at least one side? You also want to check if it has the required number of net area of flood openings, and then you can determine whether or not that is compliant with your community's or is the enclosure compliant. And then additionally, you want to check if there's an attached garage and whether or not that is compliant with your community's floodplain regulations. And if the enclosure is determined to be compliant, then that is not going to be considered the lowest floor. The lowest floor is then going to change to the next higher floor. And then you just want to double check that that next higher floor is at or above base flood elevation. And whether or not there are utilities or mechanicals, which are being stored in that enclosure, and whether or not those are able to be moved up to the next highest floor or not. All right, so in section D, this is where the surveyor or engineer or architect is going to essentially seal that their elevation determination is correct, and also giving their license number, because this is they are putting their license behind certifying that this document is accurate to the best of their ability. Right. I apologize, this got a little out of order. This was the checklist for section C, which we already went through. All right, so going to move on to some common elevation certificate errors, just very briefly. So here is a summary of what we typically see in elevation certificates. So the most common is the wrong building diagram number. Now, this is something that the engineer or surveyor or architect should have a good grasp of, but it is occasionally missed or not represented correctly. There are many FEMA resource documents that I'll be going over with some resources that can help out with determining which building diagrams should be used. Also, some more common errors are that machinery and or equipment is not entered. So such as a tractor, snow machine, or any utilities that are in the basement and or garage. We also often get incorrect community numbers. If that's something that you are unsure of, please just reach out to me and I can happily just give you your community identification number. Also, that goes for the map panel numbers. Both of those are fairly easily looked up online through either the Map Service Center or New Hampshire's Flood Hazard Viewer. Also, sometimes the address is not filled out correctly, and the elevations are often not filled out correctly. Then you also want to make sure that it is the right community name. For instance, I'll give Hopkinton and Kentucky as an example. Officially, everything's under Hopkinton, but a local might fill it out as being in Kentucky, and that might not necessarily go well with FEMA because that is not the official community name. All right, then additionally, some other errors are that the elevation certificate is not complete or is not for completed construction. Again, if you are doing a pre-construction elevation certificate, you always want to make sure that it is followed up with a post-construction elevation certificate or post-construction report. All right, so the last few common errors are that attached garages are often not filled out correctly or reported. And also just make sure that your dates are all correct and lined up. All right, so I actually went through this a little quickly today in efforts to try to get us off a little early before the next webinar at noon. So I'm just going to wrap up with some helpful resources. So if you are a CRS, community rating system participant, there is a CRS elevation certificate checklist at crsresources.org that can help you when looking for or when reviewing elevation certificates for CRS. Additionally, FEMA has many different bulletins. This is one that they produced in 2004 on elevation certificates, but they also have plenty of other building recommendation bulletins that FEMA releases regularly. I encourage you to go to the FEMA publication library and browse through there to see whether or not there are any helpful resource documents for you. All right, so I'm just going to leave my contact information here. And also Stephanie Frechette, she has been monitoring the chat. She is also my coworker who works with the National Flood Insurance Program. But at this point, I'm going to give us some time for questions. If anybody has any, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you, or if you want to put any questions in chat, I would be happy to answer them there as well. I'm just going to give people some time to think. And I think I saw someone's hand raise really quickly. I'm not sure who that was.
Oh.
Um,
Oh, there's a question in the chat. Is there any specific resource for elevation certificates on properties on steep slopes?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically for like steep slopes, but that would be something I would recommend going to the building diagrams because that's going to because it depends on if so yeah, because your lowest floor on the steep slope, that bottom or that yeah, the lowest floor might not necessarily be below grade on all sides. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know of any specific resources for that. That is something that I would recommend maybe chatting with um, the project engineer on how they came up with which building diagram that they used. Sorry, I can't be more help on that.
We have another question in the chat. What are the best resources for verifying conversion factors?
So the conversion factors are generally going to be used by, if I'm remembering this correctly, they are generally used if the engineer or the surveyor is using a different like elevation or vertical data. And that engineer or surveyor should be able to provide you with that conversion factor because um, it really just depends on like which vertical data is being used. There's not like I guess the standard would be the North American vertical datum of 88, but that would be something that you would want to check with the surveyor. Also, if you have any questions that on the elevation data itself, that's all uh, it is all derived through the USGS. So I would check there if you had any questions on those vertical datums. I will be, oh yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, we will be sending out the slides for the PowerPoint to everyone who attended today. All right. If there are no other questions, I'm going to let us get out early, have a little break, give you some of your day back. This is the PowerPoint, and I will be sending it to everybody. Additionally, if you are looking for renewing your certified floodplain manager certificate, and you need a certificate of attendance for this webinar, feel free to email me after the fact and I can give you one. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I will be sending out these slides, and the recording is going to be posted on our YouTube page. So you should be able to go back and listen to it and review the slides on your own time if you want. But thank you for coming to this webinar. And if any of you are going to be on the planning webinar on floodplain management at noon, I will see you in an hour. All right, see you later.